My name is Winnie Clegg. I'm from Brandon, Mississippi. I'm a music major at the Mississippi University for Women, and this is my homograph. I identify as a lesbian. I've identified that way probably since I was about 15. I am out in some circles and not in others. My personal preference would be out everywhere and not have to hide anything about any part of my life. But being in the South and growing up in a very Southern Baptist religious family, there are a lot of people who would no longer speak to me if I were to be fully out, and I'm not prepared to lose them at this time. So, Brandon is somewhat accepting and somewhat not. I spend a lot of time with the theater community, which is very accepting, but the town itself, I don't know anyone who doesn't spend their Sundays in church and their Wednesday nights in church, and they all kind of tend to reflect that. A lot of them, especially people my age and closer to my age, are very open and accepting, but a lot of people, my friends' parents, older people in the area, are not as open and accepting. And Brandon actually is trying to ban a gay-straight alliance group at Brandon High School. So I always thought I was just really religious and holy because I was not attracted to guys and I was just really focused on God. And then I was like, oh wait, nope, I totally just like girls. That's the whole thing. And I guess I realized that right around 14, 15, 16, somewhere around in there. All my friends were guys, but my parents and my siblings were all like, when are you gonna start dating so-and-so? And I was like, don't really have any interest in that. And I guess that's when I realized I didn't have interest in dating my guy friends. The handful of female friends I had, I was like, I wouldn't mind dating them. And that's when I guess I realized. It is the Bible Belt. The way people perceive everything in the South has to do with the way they grew up in church, or which church they grew up in, or whether or not they grew up in church. You may have grown up in church, but now you're not in church. You may have grown up out of church, and now you're in church. You may have grown out of church the whole time, but everybody you knew went to church. Everything in the South kind of revolves around church. I think it makes me more annoyed when people are not accepting for religious reasons, because I'm like, well, some religious people do accept and some don't, but the most accepting community is those who are not religious, and so I guess it kind of makes me a little bitter towards religious people who don't accept the LGBT community based solely on their religion. In high school, I thought the community must be very incredibly small because I knew all of 3 gay people, all men, and but when I got to college, I saw a thriving gay community. There's jokes about the school a lot, about everyone's a lesbian and all the guys are gay, and it's not true, but no one is afraid to hide here, and so I guess I learned that there are other people in the community down here. Honestly, there's a lot of stereotypes that tend to, I guess, just come from the people who were raised in a different time. The South moves very slowly, and people change their minds just as slowly, and so if they're taught, well, this is wrong, this is perverted, gay men just want to rape your little boys, gay women, whatever, there's a lot of negative stereotypes from people who grew up in a very conservative time where it was considered incredibly wrong and in some cases illegal. And those stereotypes die hard, Being in the LGBTQ community, it's nice to have a group of people who aren't afraid to hide. And even those who are not out seem to be more open and comfortable with themselves because there's some aspect of their lives they've had to accept that may not be acceptable everywhere, and so people in the community tend to not be afraid to hide their interests, and I really like being a part of a group that is not afraid to hide any part of who they are. Most of the challenges that I've faced come from mostly just words that people say. My freshman year of college, I had a guy throw condoms at me because he said I might change my mind. And that is one of the worst things that's ever happened to me, and me personally. And like, I've heard all these stories of people who have been bullied or harassed because of their sexual orientation, but that was the first I ever experienced of it outside of my family. And I think that's the hardest thing, is not even actions against people, but the words they can say, because they do hurt. Some of my best memories are just spending time and hanging out and going on random road trips, or spontaneously going to Pride with my friends in the community, and sometimes bonding over the fact that, hey, these people hate us, and sometimes just making jokes about our own sexuality and just enjoying spending time together. Being part of the community, that kind of gives you an instant connection with somebody because they automatically know some of what you're going through. The one thing I wish I always knew in high school is that there are other lesbians in the South. The only lesbians I knew through the internet, who lived in California or in New York or in other countries, and I'd never met another one in the South till I got to school. And I think the most important thing that I would want to know is that there are other LGBTQ people in the South. Okay, so for someone who is trying to understand the community, I think the most important thing to realize is that our sexuality doesn't really define us. It's part of who we are, yeah, and a lot of us are activists because of it, but we're just normal people. We take road trips, we don't sleep enough in college, we go to midnight premieres before a final. It's, we're normal people, we do everyday things, and our sexuality never changes any of that.